It's another Blue Jackets game day. It's another preseason game, and we're seeing a couple more NHL regulars, plus some guys that might challenge for a spot on opening night. We're going to discuss on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And let's get started in this episode by talking about tonight's game. I'm expecting a much better game. The lineup, which we'll talk about in a second, is not as veteran heavy as I expected it to be, but there's still a lot more experience in the lineup than there was in the opening game. Couple of guys making their Blue Jackets debut tonight, and I believe the only returnee from the game on Monday against St. Louis is Luca Pinelli. Will be playing his second straight game. I'm surprised they haven't sent him back to Ottawa yet, but I imagine he's probably going to be among the next round of cuts. It looks to me, and again, I'll go through the roster in a second, it looks to me like there's a handful of guys going to be in the lineup tonight that probably will be making their way to Cleveland tomorrow at some point. This is, hey, have a preseason game, and then, we'll see you later. I expect Pinelli to be on that list. He is not going to be going to Cleveland. He will be going back to Ottawa because he is not old enough to play in Cleveland yet. But still, lots of intriguing names on the line. So let me pull up the roster. So in terms of forwards, we've got Sean Kuraly, Owen Sellinger, James Van Riemsdyk, Gavin Brindley, Luca Pinelli, Igor Chinikov, Jake Godet, Luca Del Bel-Beluz, James Malatesta, Mikhail Pucha, Kirill Marchenko, and Kent Johnson. On defense, we've got Jake Christensen, Denis Bateychuk, Ivan Provorov, Cole Clayton, Erica Branson, and Damon Severson, and then Zach Sorchenko and Elvis Merzlikins in goal. Let's get the goalies out the way. Merzlikins is going to be making the start. I imagine it will be a similar experience to the game on Monday, where Elvis will probably get 2 periods, and then they'll have Zach Sorchenko come in for the 3rd period. That's fine by me. They might split it 50-50. It depends on what the 2nd period looks like, I guess. But I'm not expecting Elvis to play the whole game. I am expecting Elvis to have a reasonably good performance tonight. It's against the Blues, who are... I feel like the St. Louis Blues are such a weird team because I can never really get a beat on whether they're going to be good or not. They're currently 0-2 in the preseason so far, which, I mean, makes very little difference, I'm just pulling up the roster that they are. It looks like it's going to be a fairly young roster. Players of note is Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, old friend Scott Harrington, Ryan Suter, and that's about it in terms of notable NHL guys. They've got Kasperi Kapanen, they've got Nathan Walker, they've got Justin Falk, Joel Hofer is going to be in goal. So I'm expecting the Blue Jackets have a better lineup, I think. So we'll really see what's going to happen there. But it's very similar to Monday night. I don't think they're going to be as dominant as the Sabres were because this is not as heavy an NHL roster as the Sabres had against the Blue Jackets. But the Blue Jackets definitely have more veterans in this game and higher up in the lineup veterans as well than St. Louis does. St. Louis is bringing a prospect and rookie-heavy lineup. We're going to see Dalibor Dvorsky, who is one of their more recent draft picks, who I'm excited to see what he's like. But again, this is very much we're going to send the kids and then 3 adults, which is what the Blue Jackets did to Buffalo on Monday. So We'll see how it goes. I'm expecting pretty reasonable things. I want to talk about line combinations kind of in specific in a minute. One thing that is, and I feel like every thought I have right now should be prefaced with, yes, I know it's the preseason, but, however, I'm surprised that the Blue Jackets are going with lines that aren't expected to be lines during the season, if that makes sense. I am so for example, and again, we'll talk about kind of line specifics in a minute, but it looks like it's going to be Kirill Marchenko, Sean Corelli, and Igor Chinikov on the top line for the Blue Jackets. A line that I am in theory fine with. It is not a line that is going to be a line in the regular season. It just isn't. They're both going to play higher up in the lineup than Sean Corelli is, and similarly again on Monday night, it was, I believe, Sillinger centering Olivier and Dylan Gambrell, and I am surprised that they're not doing. I'm sorry that they're not running lines, and this is not me saying that they should run their NHL roster every single night. I am surprised that they're not running I'm surprised that we haven't seen the Jenner, Monahan, Marchenko line together in a preseason game yet. That will come, I'm sure. But I'm surprised that they're playing different lines that they're practicing with, if that makes sense. So, like I said, we'll see how it goes. It felt a little bit disjointed on Monday night, which makes sense. It's the first preseason game. Everyone's kind of playing with a heavy heart, shall we say. I'm sure it's going to be kind of a very emotional experience tonight. In Nationwide, obviously the first home game since losing Johnny Gaudreau a couple of weeks ago. We'll see how it goes. But that was kind of one thing that has stood out to me is they've had guys training together in groups. And again, another one that stood out is Fantilli has been playing between James Van Riemsdyk and Igor Chinikov, but we haven't seen the JVR Fantilli Chinikov line. Two of those guys are playing tonight. Fantilli played on Monday. Just weird and surprising to me, and maybe that's on me, but I am fascinated to see what the lines start to, and I assume that as we start to lose guys like, Pucher, like guys like Jake Gaudette, who's going to be making his Blue Jackets debut tonight, I believe. I'm going to be interested to see how long it takes them to kind of get into a rhythm of, okay, these are the guys that are probably going to be playing together in the regular season. Let's put them together in the preseason. I think obviously I want to say it was the 2015-16 season where they just went absolutely sicko mode in the preseason and were winning every game like 7-2. And they had that top line of, it was Foligno, Johansson, and Brandon Saad. And they played together the entire preseason. There was no up and down the lineup. There was no we're going to practice you with this guy and then play with another guy. And I guess it's probably down to different coaching standards. I would love to pick Seth Topal's brain about Dean Everson's kind of training camp thoughts, but just something that I was thinking about this morning and that surprised me a little bit. I'll be interested to see what happens as we get into kind of game 4, 5, 6. The Blue Jackets have 8 preseason games, I believe, which is a lot of preseason games. So it does give them a big chance to, again, give guys a chance to play higher up in the lineup, and we'll talk about specifics in a minute here. But it was very strange to me when I was looking at the lines. I was like, none of these lines are going to be together in the regular season. Why are we doing this now? But let's talk about some of those line combinations. We haven't been given defense pairings yet, but I want to talk about what I think the defense pairings are going to be as well. So we'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about Indeed, because we're all driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, though, the best way to search for a candidate isn't actually to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. They are your matching and hiring platform. They've got over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And it's not just faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. And you can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster and you don't have to play phone tag or email tag or any of the other 7 ways that it's so complicated to get in touch with someone when you are job hunting or when you are hiring. I've never been, I don't own my own business. I have never hired other people, but I have been job hunting. And Indeed is the only site that I used when I was job hunting. So it makes sense to me that you would use it for hiring as well. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about the preseason game tonight against the St. Louis Blues. Let's talk about line combinations. I talked about it a little bit before the break, but line combinations. It looks like we're going to have Kramarchenko with Sean Corelli and Igor Chinikov. We're going to have James Van Riemsdyk with Luca Del Bel-Belluz and Kent Johnson. We're going to have Mikhail Pucher with Owen Sillinger and Gavin Brindley. That's a line that is exciting to me for reasons I'll talk about in a minute. And then James Malatesta with Jake Gaudette and Luca Pinelli. So let's start at the top and work our way down. I don't hate this top line. Again, it's confusing to me that this is the top line that we're going with, but I think Marchenko and Chinikov work well together. I'm looking for Marchenko to have a big game. He's probably the strongest forward that they're putting out there tonight. So he's really going to have to be a leader on the score sheet. I think it's really interesting to see him and Chinikov back together. And then Sean Corelli in the middle. This again feels like a very much a can Sean Corelli hang with the big boys? I'm not sure that he can, but he is a reasonable bottom 6 center. If nothing else, he can probably hold it together while Chinikov and Marchenko do their thing. Next up, we've got JVR, Del Bel-Belluz, and Kent Johnson. This is 2 kids and the adult. I'm interested to see how JVR does playing top 6 minutes. He played very limited minutes in Boston, which was where he was last. Obviously, I don't want to say getting up there in age, because I believe he's only about 35 years old. So it's not like he's, the oldest man alive or anything, but he's getting up there in terms of hockey specifically. He is not as good as he once was. He was averaging 13 and a half minutes against the Bruins, with the Bruins last season. So we'll see how it goes. I'll be interested to see what he does. I'm expecting power play from him. I'm expecting him to, again, kind of solidify a line of 2 kids. And Johnson, again, is kind of hopefully, going to be the driver on that line. Del Bel-Belluz is a guy that I like a lot. I'll be interested to see how he does. They think that they've got something there in terms of a bottom 6 center for the future, which is really exciting. Maybe even a middle 6 center. So they're going to try him out. The third line is actually the line that I'm the most excited to see, because I think it's probably going to be a top line in Cleveland this season. I have my thoughts on whether Gavin Brindley should be going to Cleveland at all, but if he does, playing him with Owen Sillinger and Mikhail Pucher, I think is going to be a really great idea. Pucher's got a heck of a shot on him, has kind of had some ups and downs in Cleveland. I love Owen Sillinger. I've talked about it extensively on this podcast. He is the Boone Jenner of Cleveland, the Swiss Army knife. He'll play in any position, up and down the lineup. And you know how much I love Gavin Brindley. And I think that's going to be a line that will do a lot of damage in Cleveland. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. And then the fourth line is James Malatesta, Jake Gaudette, and Luca Pinelli. I think Luca Pinelli getting a second look at the preseason is really interesting, because obviously he is a guy that I think this is his second training camp with the Blue Jackets. He was drafted in, I want to say 2023, kind of a later on draft pick that dropped in his draft stock, but then came out and scored, I think, 48 goals last season for the Ottawa 67s. He did play on Monday night with the Sabres. And I believe, I'm just going to double check, Pucher played as well. And that is the only doubling up that we are seeing, unless I'm missing someone, which I don't think I am. So those guys clearly both have something to prove and also have clearly shown something that intrigues the coaching staff in Columbus. I think Pinelli more specifically than Pucher. Pucher is going to be AHL bound. It's very, very, very unlikely that Luca Pinelli makes the big club out of training camp. He is going to be going back to Ottawa at some point to play in the OHL. He's the captain of the 67s. And again, I'm looking for him to have just an absolutely monster season for the 67s this year, unless he gets traded, because that's how the OHL works. But I'm looking for him to have a massive year in juniors. He turns 20 this spring, so he will be eligible to join the Monsters next season, where I think, again, he's kind of undersized. I think he's still got a little bit of growing to do, a little bit of strength to put on. But I think he's a very, very good player that I think is going to surprise a lot of people. And I think that the coaching staff is maybe going to give him a couple of regular season games before turfing him back to Ottawa, so that they can give him up to 9 games before his entry-level contract kicks in. I think he maybe gets one or two. We'll see. The Blue Jackets, knock on wood, have been pretty lucky with injuries to the main guys thus far. Obviously, Justin Danforth had off-season surgery. They're being really cautious with Lindstrom and Dumais, who both have lingering injuries from last season. But no one who I'm expecting to start on the opening night has gotten injured yet. Again, I'm just going to knock on wood because my hockey powers can only be used for evil. So Pinelli getting a second game, I think, is a good thing, and I'm excited to see what he does. Playing a little bit lower in the lineup this time, I believe, so that might help. Playing with 2 guys that he'll probably play with in Cleveland when he does get there. He joined the team as a Black Ace for the playoff run when the Ottawa 67 season finished, and didn't get to play in any games. But I suspect what's happened is that Trent Vogelhuber's eye has been caught by him. Trent Vogelhuber obviously coached the Cleveland Monsters. We love Trent Vogelhuber on this podcast. Seems like he's a really good. He has an eye for talent, I think. So I wonder if this is him kind of scouting out Pinelli himself and the organization being like, you know what, we trust you. Let's see how it goes. So interested to see what Pinelli does tonight. Interested to see what everyone does tonight. Like I said, this is the first kind of preseason action that everyone is getting apart from Pinelli and Pucher. They have not given me defense pairings yet. However, I feel like I could probably make an educated guess. Because my guess is that it's probably going to be Matejchuk and Severson as a pairing. Jake Christensen will probably go with Ivan Provorov, and then Cole Clayton will go with Eric Gabranson. That's what makes the most sense to me. They might flip Christensen and Clayton, but I'm assuming it'll be Severson, Provorov, and Gabranson as kind of the adults, and then they'll each get a child to babysit. I think Matejchuk Severson is a really interesting pairing to watch out for. Just because I think it's gonna be high chaos, but I think it's gonna be fun. Hopefully having Matejchuk there will kind of help with Severson's defensive lapses, shall we call them. Again, it's preseason. It's going to be fine. And I think Provorov and Christensen are also pretty well suited to each other, and that's a potential pairing that we could see in the regular season as well. Jake Christensen pushing for a roster spot. And then Cole Clayton is a guy that played for the Monsters last season, and on the strength of his game with the Monsters, got signed to a 1-year NHL contract. He will be with the Monsters. He's not, again, I don't know that he's in any kind of state to join the team full-time, but he and Owen Stillinger both signed NHL contracts this summer. Again, kind of off the back of their play in the AHL, which is really great and really fun. Cole Clayton, big leader for the Monsters. Like I said, great to see him get rewarded for his play. He's going to be an RFA at the end of this year. I believe this is technically an ELC for the Blue Jackets because he's under the age of, I want to say 25, but he again is a guy that I'm going to be watching. And if you can find, like, again, injuries happen. If you can get a guy like Cole Clayton and you know what you have with him, is he an option when players inevitably get injured and you need to call someone up to play them on the third line for, 14 minutes a night, potentially. I'm really interested to see what happens with the Clayton Gabranson pairing. Hopefully it goes better than the Johnson Kuhlmans pairing that got a little bit victimized on Monday night. But again, I think that was because everyone was playing above their station. I think this is going to be a much more balanced lineup. I think it's probably going to be guys will be more likely matched against guys that are at their level or potentially lower. In the case of guys like Marchenko, Chinikov, JVR, Johnson, like I think those guys are probably going to be playing a little bit above the competition that they're probably going to be playing against in the regular season. So we'll see how it goes. That's kind of all I've got for line combination. So I want to talk about who needs to have a big game tonight, because I think there are a lot of guys that are not necessarily even fighting for their place in the lineup, but I think they're fighting for their specific spot in the lineup, if that makes sense. There are some holes in the roster. Blue Jackets lost 2 top 6 forwards this summer. Someone's got to be there to fill those gaps. So I think we'll see guys that are fighting to fill those gaps, and then guys that are going to be fighting to fill the gaps that are being made by, everyone's bumping up a level. And then once you get to, like, the Chinikov getting bumped up, Johnson getting bumped up, whoever, then you have kind of a group of players. So your Brindleys, your Malatestas, your Del Bubaloozers, etc., that are all kind of competing for that one roster spot, the next level up. So let's talk about who needs to have a big game and kind of what I'm looking out for in tonight's game. That's coming up in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I want to tell you about FanDuel. And if you're an NFL fan, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. And here's the best bit. If you place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So you don't even have to win or lose. Just put $5 on literally whatever you want. It can be something as boring as the Chiefs win a game. It can be as exciting as, I don't know, put $5 on the Jaguars winning the Super Bowl. Whether you win or lose, you're going to get those $200 you can use to bet on whatever you want. It's FanDuel.com that you can go to do this. They're America's #1 sportsbook. They're our #1 sportsbook. Once again, FanDuel.com. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We'll talk about tonight's preseason game. Let's finish off with some thoughts on who needs to have a big game tonight. I think for me, it's important to see Elvis Merzlikins have a good game. He's playing against a reasonably weak lineup in St. Louis. There's going to be a lot of talk about Merzlikins this season. He needs to bounce back. The Blue Jackets, and you know me. You know how big of a defender of Elvis I have been basically since the very beginning. He is running out of time in Columbus. He is on a big contract. There is a new GM in town that does not have the same attachment to the players that the old GM did. If he has another bad season this season, and he was better last season than he was the season before, so are we maybe seeing him starting to trend back upwards? Maybe. The Blue Jackets don't need Vezina-level goaltending from Elvis. They need league average goaltending from Elvis. They don't need him to be Igor Shesterkin the same way that the Rangers need Igor Shesterkin to be Igor Shesterkin. If they can get if they can get a 905 to a 910 out of Elvis this season, 2 thumbs up from me. That was only 1 thumb up. 2 thumbs up from me. But we need to see that start now. Elvis, I think, was deeply, deeply affected by the loss of his friend 3 years ago. And I think we're only really starting to see him start to recover from that now. And then he loses another friend in Johnny Gaudreau. So We'll see how it does, but I really do think that Elvis is kind of not on his last chance yet, but Tarasov is knocking at the door. I think Jet Greaves has shown that he can be a successful NHL goaltender. Maybe not a starter, but I think he can definitely. He is a guy that can be. He can be an NHL goaltender. You know, maybe not a star, but he can be an NHL goaltender. Elvis's seat is getting a little hot. You know, he got benched for large portions of last season. They rolled 3 goalies, and he was the 3rd goalie for like a month. He asked for a trade, rescinded it. Asked for a trade again, and then rescinded it again, as far as I'm aware. He needs to be dominant from the beginning because he has a very, very short leash. So I need him to look like the Elvis we saw a couple of years ago, because I feel like if he gets knocked off that number 1 spot, it's going to be really hard for him to win it back. If Tarasov can stay healthy, knock on wood, he might take that starting spot and he might run with it. So Elvis is a guy that I'm looking at tonight to have a good game. Other guys, obviously, Denton Matejchuk, you're looking for him to make an impact. I think playing him with Severson is a good idea. He's going to get top 4 minutes, we hope. So we'll see how he does, see how he copes against kind of top 4 NHL defenseman minutes, see how he copes against the other team's top 6, let's say. And I think we're going to see, hopefully, the Matejchuk that you saw in Moose Jaw last season, the Matejchuk that we saw in Cleveland at the end of last season when they were in the playoffs. He was phenomenal. I think he's NHL ready. I'm really excited to see him on NHL ice tonight. He might be the guy that I am watching the most. Other players that I'm watching, Kent Johnson obviously missed the tail end of last season, had a rough season overall, is now fully healthy, is looking good, according to people that have been at all of the practices and the scrimmages and all sorts of things. He needs to have he needs to come out of the starting gate like just red hot. You know, if he has a slow start to the season, I think it's going to be a really tough hill for him to climb, especially when there's so much competition for guys in the top 6. Currently, he is in a 3rd pairing role. I believe he's with Sillinger and Sillinger and Voronkov, I believe he's mostly been skating with in training camp. I personally would have tried him on the top line with Monahan and Gaudreau and Marchenko, in that kind of Gaudreau role, because I think they're very similar players. But I'm not the head coach, so we'll see. But he needs to come out of the starting gate hot, because I feel like I don't think his leash is short necessarily in the same way that Elvis is short, but he needs to show that he can hang in the top 6. Because I don't think his game is suited to a bottom 6 role. And if you put him in the bottom 6 and expect him to succeed and earn his place in the top 6, I think there's probably going to be a little bit of a disconnect there, and I think he's going to struggle. And then we start the whole cycle again, you know? Like I already said, Marchenko, I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think he's going to be the driver on the ice. I'm looking for him to be the best player on the ice, because there is no reason that anyone on the ice should be better than him looking at this lineup. And that's no disrespect to anyone else, but he should be the best player on the ice. And so I'm interested to see what happens with him. So that's what, a goalie, a defenseman, 2 forwards. Those are the guys I'm looking out for. We'll see how it goes. Brindley is also a guy that I'm going to be watching, just because I always like to watch Brindley play. And again, he's a guy that is on the outside looking in right now for the main roster. I think he probably deserves to be there, but we'll see what he does in his game tonight, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe he'll get rewarded with some top 6 time, or potentially, again, the line combinations for training camp have been confusing me, and I haven't really talked about that. But the choosing not to put him and Fantilli together just to see how it goes is a wild choice to me. So maybe if he does well tonight, they will reward him with getting to play with his best friend. Who can say? That's kind of all I've got for today. Tomorrow it is Thursday, so we'll have another episode. The days of the week are just kind of a blur at the minute. We'll have another episode tomorrow. We'll talk about tonight's game, who we liked, who we didn't. We will not be panicking yet because it is game 2 of the preseason, but we'll kind of pick apart the performances of some of the guys that need to have good games. We'll pick apart the performances of the veterans. We'll take a look at who's doing what and what people should actually be doing and whether they're doing it. Thank you for listening to today's episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. We are Locked On Blue Jackets, and we are free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube and SiriusXM. I am _Jacob Foster on Twitter, JAKOBFORSTEI. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jacket on Twitter. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Until tomorrow, thank you once again for listening, and make sure you stay locked on.